Well, in just a moment, I want to get into some exciting changes and things that are happening here at Mission Church. But before I do that, I want to introduce you to a man by the name of Nehemiah. See, this week we're going to start a new series, just a very short series for the next 4 weeks. And this series is called Next Level Faith. Next Level Faith. And we're going to challenge you and each other really to take another step toward growing in Christ, another step of faith in following after Jesus. And one of the people that I want us to look at, their story, their example, and their work for God is in the book of Nehemiah. Now, Nehemiah was an interesting character. Nehemiah lived in what was called the ancient city of Susa. And that city is now found in Iran, just so you kind of know where we're talking about. This was in the Middle East. And Nehemiah was a Jewish boy. Nehemiah was born into a Jewish family, but he did not live in Israel. See, back in 586 BC, this is a little history lesson for you, okay? There was this king named Nebuchadnezzar, and he was one of the most powerful kings to ever live, and he went out and conquered many of the known regions of the world. And one of the things Nebuchadnezzar did was he conquered Israel, and he took the capital city, Jerusalem, and he broke all the walls down, and he burned them up with fire, and he burned all their gates and all the defenses that they had there in the city, and he took almost all the people out of the city of Jerusalem, God's special city, and he took them away into captivity to be slaves back in his own lands. And so fast forward several years, over 150 years later, and you have Nehemiah. Now, Nehemiah, that means, was born as a slave. Nehemiah was born into captivity. It was probably his great-grandparents that were hauled off by King Nebuchadnezzar to this foreign place far away from anything they knew, and now they lived in the heart of Babylon in this city called Susa. And Nehemiah, we're going to see, is an amazing character. There's so many traits that Nehemiah demonstrates throughout the book. He demonstrates great courage, great leadership, right? Nehemiah demonstrates great compassion. Well, one of the things I love about Nehemiah is his faith. All right, and we're going to see it today, even in Nehemiah chapter 1. We're going to see Nehemiah's faith, how Nehemiah followed God. Nehemiah would not let anything stop him from doing what God had called him to do. You see, he may have been taken far away from his homeland. He may have been separated from his family. And he may have been far away from everything he had ever known, but he didn't forget his relationship with his God. Right? And someone, somewhere, whether it was his grandparents or his parents, had instilled in him a faith in God. And we're going to see that. So Nehemiah is hanging out in the city doing his very important job, which we'll learn about more in a minute. And one day he has some friends come from out of town, and they bring him this report. It's a very difficult and tragic report. And so I want to invite you, if you haven't already turned to Nehemiah, we're going to be in Nehemiah chapter 1. If you're looking for it in your Bible, open to the middle where Psalms are, and then go to the left. All right, go to the left, and you'll pass Job, and then you'll hit Esther and Nehemiah. Now, in Nehemiah chapter 1, we find Nehemiah hanging out in the city of Susa, and this is what it says about the report that he heard. All right, Nehemiah 1, verse 1. These are the words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah. Now it happened in the month of Chislev in the 20th year, as I was in Susa, the capital, that Hanani, one of my brothers, came with certain men from Judah. And I asked them concerning the Jews who had escaped, who had survived the exile, and concerning Jerusalem. Right? So Nehemiah is greeted by his brother, and they've come from far, far away from his homeland. And Nehemiah says, hey, I'm so glad to see you. I can't wait. I want to hear news. Tell me news about the remnant. That's the people who weren't carried away into exile, the people who still lived in Jerusalem. Tell me news about my brothers and sisters in Christ. Tell me news about my city, my beloved city of Jerusalem. And listen to what the report was that he heard. Verse 3. And they said to me, the remnant there in the province who had survived the exile, they're in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates are destroyed by fire. See, Nehemiah gets this report. He was devastated. Right? He gets this report and it just, no doubt, just brought him to his knees because he was anxious to hear about his homeland. And here they come and they bring this report. And the report is not good. The report is that his family members, his friends, the remnant who still live there near Jerusalem, they have no home. Their city has no walls around it. Did you notice the word shame? Right? He says the people are living in shame. Why? Because when you had no wall around your city, you had disgrace, you had shame, you had no hope, right? When you had a wall around your city back in those days, that was your symbol of hope. That was your symbol of stability. That was your fortress. That was what you knew would protect you in the case of an invading army or any robbers that might come, was you had this wall, you had this defense, you had this security, right? It would be like going to bed at night and having your doors blown off the hinges. And you just go upstairs and go to bed, just hoping that nobody comes walking into your house to harm you in the middle of the night. And Nehemiah gets this report about the walls being broken down, and his people are at great risk. They're at risk from people coming in and invading them and robbing them and stealing from them. They're exposed to great shame and disgrace because the walls have been broken down. Not only that, but they have no hope, right? Because there's no wall. There's nothing to build around. They have no unifying city that they can all be drawn to. Not only that, but it was creating a spiritual problem. One of the things we're going to see in the book later is that the people of God had walked away from God because they had no city, they had no place to gather. And because their concerns were so scattered between how to care for their families and how to farm and how to make sure that robbers didn't come and take their things away. And they could not focus on worshiping God. And we're going to see later in the book that as Nehemiah restores the walls to their city, that it also restores their faith and their hope in God and their relationship with God. And so Nehemiah gets this devastating report about all the challenges that his city, that his people are facing. And I want you to listen to his response. Look at his response in verse 4. As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days. And I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. Nehemiah was very concerned. You could tell that Nehemiah didn't just say, oh, hey, brother Hananiah, man, tough luck for you. I live here in Susa in this nice palace in this convenient place, and I feel good. I have all my needs met. Everything's good. But hey, I'll be praying for you, okay? Like, that's not what he did. No, man, this news broke him down. I mean, he got on his face before God and he started praying and he started beseeching God for mercy for his people. And Nehemiah went to drastic measures, right? He started fasting, all right? That means you stop eating. All right, so Nehemiah for like weeks went without food and he stopped eating and he was weeping. Like sometimes when they would weep, they would just take all their regular clothes off and they would put on sackcloth, which is really hard and scratchy and itchy, kind of like a burlap bag. And sometimes they would even shave their head to show that they were in mourning. Why? Because this was a serious thing. They were concerned. Nehemiah was really broken up and concerned about his people. And so he had this response. He was moved and he took these drastic steps. You see, Nehemiah didn't just say, oh, hey, big deal, no problem. That's your problem, not mine. No, he owned that problem. It was his people. He felt their need. He felt their grief. He had compassion for them. And then in verse 5, we hear this prayer that Nehemiah prays to the God of heaven. And listen to this prayer and listen to the words of faith that just all throughout this prayer, you can hear Nehemiah's faith. Verse 5, and I said, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments, let your ear be attentive and your eyes be open to the prayer of your servant that I now pray before you day and night for the people of Israel, your servants, confessing the sins of your people of Israel, which we have sinned against you. Even I and my father's house, we have sinned. We have acted very corruptly against you, and we have not kept your commandments, the statutes and the rules that you commanded your servant Moses. Remember, God, the word that you commanded your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the peoples. But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, though your outcasts are in the uttermost parts of heaven, from there I will gather them and bring them to the place that I have chosen to make my name dwell there. They are your servants and your people, whom you have redeemed by your great power and by your strong hand. O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight to fear your name, and give success to your servant today and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. Now I was the cupbearer to the king. Now, a few things that we notice here is, number one, Nehemiah turned to God. When he was faced with a difficult challenge, his homeland is devastated. His friends and his family members have nowhere to turn to. Nehemiah turns to God. He looks to God. He says, God, I may be far away from this problem, and I may not have the answer to this challenge, but God, I know that you are present and that you are near, and that when I go through a problem, I can turn to you and I can look to you and I can cry out to you. And so Nehemiah, in the midst of his challenge, he turned straight to God with his problem. Right? Some of us could learn something there, right? Sometimes we go to our friends, sometimes we go to our family members, sometimes we go to our lawyers, sometimes we go to our counselor, sometimes we go to our psychiatrist, sometimes we go to our doctor, and when all that fails, then we turn to God. But Nehemiah, no, he wasn't like that. Nehemiah turned to God right away, and Nehemiah said, God, I know what the problem is. I know what the problem is. And Nehemiah began to confess the sins of his people. Did you catch that? I mean, it's something we don't practice all that often anymore, but Nehemiah was praying for the sins of his country, and he was praying for the sins of his family and the things his father had done wrong and the things he had done wrong. And Nehemiah was just saying, God, I want there to be a clean slate. I want to make sure that there's no sin in my heart, nothing that would separate me in relationship with you, God. And so he just began to pray, and he just began to confess all of the sin that he could think of, his family's sin and his own sin. And he just began to put it all out there and praying for God to forgive the sins that he had committed. And notice what Nehemiah does. He gives us a little bit of reminder, a little reminder of Old Testament history. See, way back when in the Old Testament, God had brought his people, Israel, into the chosen promised land. He'd set them up in this beautiful land with all these resources and all this wonderful stuff. And God brought all the people there into the land, and God made them a promise. And he said, if you follow me, and if you obey my commandments, and if you walk with me, and you teach your children to walk with me, and you fear God, then guess what? Everything's going to go great in this land that I'm giving you. You know what? When you plant seeds, your crops are going to grow 100-fold. And no enemies are going to be able to come and destroy your land and take the things that I've given you. And you're going to be fruitful and multiply and have many children and the blessings of God. But God also made them the opposite promise. God said to the people of Israel, if you go into this land and you forget about God, and you don't follow after me, and you don't keep my commandments, and you don't obey the laws that I've given to you, and you decide that you can live life without me, then guess what? I'm going to pull back, and I'm going to let you have life without me. And you know what's going to happen when you plant seeds? They're not going to grow a crop. You're going to be poor and broke and hungry. You know what else? Your borders, they're going to fall apart, and enemies are going to come in and invade and take away things. And you know what else? You're not going to be fruitful and multiply in the land because you've not honored me and you've not followed after me. And this is what God had told the people. And look at verse 8 where Nehemiah is reminding God. He says, remember, God, the word that you commanded Moses, saying, if you were unfaithful, I will scatter you among the peoples. That's exactly what had happened. Right? Nehemiah was living this out. God had said, if you're unfaithful to me, then I'm just going to scatter you and I'll take you out of the homeland that I've given to you. And that's exactly what had happened. But in verse 9, God had promised, if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, though your outcasts are in the uttermost parts of heaven, from there I will gather them and bring them to the place that I've chosen. Right? God said, the minute you turn back to me, and the minute you're faithful to me and you start following me, then guess what? I'm going to bring all of you back home, and I'm going to honor you again. I'm going to bless you again, right? So Nehemiah is just listening to all those things. And then notice throughout this prayer that Nehemiah is asking for God's favor. He's asking for God's favor. In verse 6, he says, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to the prayer of your servant. And then over in verse 11, he prays, O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant, right? And then he prays, give success to your servant today. God, please give me favor. Give me success, God. Bless me in the endeavor that I'm about to take on. And then Nehemiah, throughout this prayer, do you notice his faith? Do you notice how he believes and trusts in God? How Nehemiah points back to who God is and his faithfulness and his love and his compassion, that Nehemiah refers to God as the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him. Nehemiah believed that God could do something about this problem. He was faced with this difficult challenge, and Nehemiah turned to God because he believed, God, you can solve this problem. Like, this is bigger than me. This is bigger than my friends, bigger than my family, bigger than my counselors. We can't figure out what to do, but God, we know that you know the answer to this problem, and we trust you. We believe in you. We believe that you can do this. We believe that you're able to handle all of these things. But I want you to notice something. In the midst of Nehemiah's faith and trust in God, he didn't just sit around waiting. No, he took action, right? Look at the very last verse here. It says, grant me mercy in the sight of this man, right? The man that he's referring to is the king of all the land, King Artaxerxes, right? And Nehemiah has a very special position. It tells us here that he was the cupbearer to the king. Now, in these days, the cupbearer had a very significant and special role in the life of the king. See, the cupbearer was the one who would taste and select the wines that the king himself would drink. The cupbearer was the one who would choose what it was that the king was drinking, and the cupbearer was there to taste the wine before handing it to the king, so that if someone tried to poison the king, then the cupbearer would be poisoned and die, but the king would live. So there was immense trust between the king and his cupbearer. There was a great relationship, and not only that, but the cupbearer had access every single day to the king's presence. You see, not many people had the privilege of going into the presence of the king and having the audience with the king. But Nehemiah was the cupbearer. He had a position of privilege. He had a position of influence. And Nehemiah could go in and even give counsel and probably some discussion with the king about the regular things that the king was dealing with, and he had the trust and the confidence of the king. And what I love is we don't have time today to get into the whole story. We'll unpack it more, but we're going to see that Nehemiah is praying for favor because he's going into the king, and he's going to ask the very king who told them they could not rebuild the walls. He's going to go in and ask them for permission to let his people go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the walls of their city. And so Nehemiah is praying for favor. And Nehemiah says, God, I know you're big enough to handle this problem, but I want you to know I'm available. And God, I believe that you put me in this position right here as this cupbearer to the king for a purpose and for a reason. And I believe that you want me to use my position and the place that you've given me so that I can make a difference. And so, God, would you give me favor, and would you use me, and would you bless me as I go about to do that? And in the coming weeks, we're going to see that God uses Nehemiah to work an awesome miracle, right? That Nehemiah, in a matter of less than 7 weeks, Nehemiah rebuilds the walls of the city of Jerusalem. He restores the dignity of his people, and he allows them to get their heart and their focus and their worship back toward God. And Nehemiah does this great work because he saw this need and he took it to God and he said, God, I'm available if you'll use me. And so Nehemiah was available to be used by God to do great things. Now you might be thinking, hey, this is a great story and a great history lesson about Nehemiah and some dude who lived, thousands of years ago and built some walls and stuff, and that's all really good and well, but what does that have to do with us? I mean, we're right here in Goodyear, America. What does Nehemiah and his walls have to do with me and you? Well, that's what I want to talk to you about this morning. You see, we live in a city also. And today, our cities, we don't have walls around them, right? But it doesn't mean that our cities don't have problems and challenges. In fact, if you have the eyes of Nehemiah and you look around at our city, then you start to see lots of needs. In fact, just a couple weeks ago before I left for the Philippines, I met with the principals here at Copper Trails. You know what I heard? I heard we have lots of needs right here in our own school. We have students who can't afford school supplies. We have families that are broken and torn apart. We have issues and problems with students that have behavioral problems and challenges, and we have to bring in another person, a dean, just to help with all the behavioral issues because kids don't have a solid family at home and they come to school and they act out. We have needs right here in our community. I got a call a week ago from the person who runs the Homeless Youth Connection Ministry right here in Goodyear. You know what they told me? They said, we got homeless teenagers. They have needs. Would you guys come and help us? Would you partner with us? And this is right here in our own city. I mean, it's easy for us. We have comfortable lives. We're blessed. We have our things that we need, and it's easy for us to drive right on by and not realize that all around us there are people who are homeless. There's people who are struggling with poverty. There's people who are struggling with big needs and challenges right here in our own city. I'm a member of our neighborhood email, and we have this app and all this stuff, and people post things all the time. And you know what people post almost every day, other than their dog getting lost, is they post things about how insecure they feel. They post things about someone's car getting broken into, about a strange person that they don't recognize in the neighborhood. They post things about their door getting broken, their landscape getting vandalized. They post things about thefts and burglarism, all kinds of things that they post on there. And it reminds me that all around us we have needs, right? And one of the things that I wonder as I read this story and I see Nehemiah, and he had this heart for his city and a heart for his people. And he saw the needs that were there and how broken down they were. And not only did he see their physical needs, but he saw their spiritual needs. Did you know that on the way to church this morning while you were driving here, that out of every 10 houses you passed, only one of them was likely on their way to church? Because more than 85 to 90% of the people right here in our community have no relationship with God. Right? They have no hope spiritually. They are struggling and lost in darkness, separated from God. And you know what? They're not just in danger of physical problems and difficulties, but they're in danger of entering into eternity lost and separated from God forever. And that's something that should break our hearts. That's something that, like Nehemiah, should cause us, man, I want to get on my face and pray and fast and weep for the people around me, the people that are hurting, the people that are lost, the people that need Jesus, and they're all around us, everywhere around us. And just like God put Nehemiah in his city for a certain time and a certain place to raise him up to do something about the problem, you know what? I believe that God put Mission Church right here for a purpose. And I believe God brought every single one of you for a purpose, and that he put you in your neighborhood, that he put you in your job and he put you in your community. Why? Not just so that you could live your life and exist and do your thing. No, he put you there for a purpose, just like Nehemiah had a purpose. The purpose is to go out and reach the community, right? See, the Bible tells us over and over that that's what we're supposed to do. I mean, after all, the main verse that Christians have is the Great Commission, right? Go into all the world and make disciples, right? That's what we're called to do. Go out into this world and tell people about Jesus and introduce them into a life-changing relationship with him. That's what we're supposed to do. Or one of my favorite versions of that is when Jesus in Acts chapter 1 told his disciples, he said, "But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses." And this is what I love, is Jesus draws out a little mental map, right? And he says, "You'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." And his disciples were there in Jerusalem, and Jesus was drawing these concentric circles. You know, every time in Scripture that Jesus calls us to go out, it's always in our own backyard first. See, it's great to get on an airplane and fly, 25 hours to the other side of the globe and tell people in the Philippines about Jesus. But guess what? God's given every single one of us a mission field, and it's right here. It's in our own backyard. It's your neighbor across the street. It's your coworker. It's the student who sits next to you in biology class or math class. It's that family that you go to soccer practice with or cheerleading practice with every single week. It's all those people in your life. It's your circle that we talk about all the time. And God has put you in that circle for a reason, for a purpose. See, I think like Nehemiah, man, he wasn't playing games. He didn't sit around waiting for something to happen. No, he got busy. He got to business. And this morning, I'm convinced, right, that there's no time. There's no time for us to be passive, for us to sit back and relax. There's no time for us to just sit around and wait and just hope that somehow people out there who are lost find Jesus, or hope that if we just show up here and have church services that people will come and figure it out. No, I think we have to be aggressive, that we have to take every means possible that we can to reach people with the gospel. I think that's our calling as Christians, to go out and love this world around us. Right? To share with them the hope that we have, right? If we have that hope, how do we not share it with other people? And so because of that, we've been praying as a staff team and as a leadership team here at the church about what are some things that we can do to continue to press forward in our community, continue to help spread the love and the light of Christ in our community. And one of the things that we've become convinced of is that it's time for us as a church to take some more steps forward. And one of those steps that we want to announce this morning is that we're going to start this fall offering 2 worship services. Now, I know some of you are saying, hey, we don't always fill up the room on one Sunday. Why would we offer 2 services? Why is the time right for us to go to 2 services now? What is the timing like, and why would we do that? And that's what I want to spend just a minute to unpack with you, okay? So the first thing I want to talk about with 2 services is the benefit of having options. All right, we live in a world where no matter where you go and no matter what you do, there's options. Every organization that you want to partner with or connect with has options. And one of the best ways that a church can be more accessible to the community is by giving options. And so we're very excited that by offering another worship service, we have a chance to reach people that maybe would come at a different worship time, that would come at a different hour of the day, that would be engaged in with us in a different way. Choices are good and helpful, and we believe that by offering more choices and more opportunities for people to engage with us, that will be a really good thing. Now, one of the things that we know about is in the fall, there's this wonderful, amazing, beautiful, blessed thing that happens called football. It's awesome. It's one of my favorite things. It's the best part of fall. I look forward to it. I mean, every single year I have this countdown and I can't wait till kickoff. But then sometimes on Sunday morning, right, when my team is playing and it's the same time as church, I have a decision to make, right? And it's a hard decision, I know. I'm the pastor, right? And yet I want to see my team play. And I understand, you can always DVR the game, but it's not quite the same. And I get that. But sometimes, just giving people options where, they can still watch their game and they can still be at church. It can be a good thing. So having options is a good thing. And I want you to know, too, that we're looking at many other options besides just adding services. One of the options that we're looking at is figuring out ways where we can stream our services live on the internet, where people, no matter where they're at, no matter how they want to access it, they can download the content and watch from home if that's where they are. That's one of the things in the world we live in, that people are accessing church and media in many different ways. And so we're trying to be intentional about that and aggressive about that. Why? Because this is the digital technological world that we live in, and we want to meet people where they are. They're not going to come to our doorstep. We have to be intentional, and we have to be aggressive to them. Now, one of the other advantages of having another service is it gives our volunteers who serve every week an opportunity to still sit and worship in a worship service with their family. And so I'm super excited about this, but I want to challenge you, and we're going to be talking about this in the next couple of weeks, that this gives you an opportunity to serve during one service and still attend the other service. For the first year and a half of our existence here at Mission Church, if people serve as a security guard, if people are helping out with the nursery, the children's ministry, right now there are people working with your children and helping in a variety of different roles. And guess what? They miss the worship service. They don't get an opportunity to sing and to worship with the band. They don't have an opportunity to hear the message and be part of the fellowship. They come and they serve and they go home. So I'm so excited because I think this will be a huge encouragement to our people that we want to encourage them that they can serve in 1 hour and also attend worship service another hour. I think that will be a huge blessing to our people. Now, there's always a lot of questions that you get whenever you have a change like this in your church. And so I want to try to address a couple of the questions that I'm already hearing about, and I'm sure I won't hit them all. So if you have other questions, please come and talk to me. All right? I would love to help you think through it and understand it. And I may not always have a satisfactory answer, but I want to try to help you as much as possible. One of the questions that you a lot of times get when a church that's smaller goes from one service and starts expanding is, what about unity? Right? Like, what if I don't see those people anymore that I used to see, but now I go to a different service, and so now we're not unified anymore? Because the underlying assumption is that if we're going to have unity, we all have to be in the same place at the same time doing the same thing. But I want to encourage you that our unity should come from Christ first, from our mission and vision second, and that even by expanding and getting bigger, we can still grow closer relationally through our small group environments. And so that's my encouragement to you is that unity can still be there through Jesus Christ and through our focus on a common mission and vision, even apart from being in the same room every single time for worship service. Now, here's another question. What if one of the services is really small? Right? What if nobody comes? What if nobody shows up? What if it's just the band up here playing songs and there's 5 people out in the audience, right? What if? Well, we can only speculate about what ifs, right? But we won't know until we try it. And we have to take, I believe, bold steps to show our community that we're ready to receive them here. And it's also a reminder to us, right, that we have empty seats and an opportunity to fill them, and that there's a community out there that needs Jesus. So we want to be aggressive about that. And if we have empty seats for a while, that's okay. That's okay. Now, here's another question. What about the possibility of burnout, right? I mean, after all, it's going to take more workers and more people to pull off an additional worship service every single week. And I want you to know, some of our workers have worked very hard and continue to work hard, and they serve every week, and they're tireless, and they're amazing. But you know what blessed me more than anything? As I was praying about this decision and thinking about these things, I met with some of our leaders. And I put this decision on the table, and I started processing this a little bit with them. And I said, We could wait. We could wait a while. We could wait until January or another time to be able to take some steps forward and be able to do this. But do you know, everyone went around the room and said, I think the time is now. And yes, it's going to take more work. And yes, it's going to mean that we all have to pull together to make it happen. But we believe as a leadership team that this is the right time and that we're willing to step up and to make those sacrifices to make it happen. Now, at the same time, I want to be real clear that it is going to take more of us pulling in the same direction to make this happen. And so next Sunday, we're going to be talking about the fact that Nehemiah, he didn't build the wall by himself. Right? He accomplished amazing things for God, but he didn't do it by himself. He pulled together a team, and they worked together, and every man did a little bit of his share, and that's what made such a powerful impact. And so I want to challenge you to come next Sunday and to be praying about, hey, if I've been sitting on the bench and not participating and not engaged and not helping out, how can God use me, right? How can I be a Nehemiah that God can use to help make a difference in my community, in my city for Christ? Now, here's another question that we're probably going to get that some people have already asked me about, and that is the question, are we going to have adult Bible studies? Right? I know when I was growing up as a kid, right, and during one service you could go to Bible study, and during the next service you could go to church. And when I was growing up as a kid, we had Sunday morning church, we had Sunday morning Sunday school, we had Sunday choir after church, we had Sunday night church, we had Wednesday night church, we had small groups, we had dozens of things during the week that you could be a part of. But you know what I've learned over the years is that most people, most average families can only commit to do about 3 things a week. Right? And my goal and my hope and prayer for you is that we structure things so that it works for your family's growth and that it works for not stressing people out. And we want to challenge you to do 3 things when you attend Mission Church, all right? We want to challenge you to come to worship service on Sundays. We want to challenge you to serve in a ministry, and we want to challenge you to attend a small group. Right? So we're not offering Bible studies. We're not offering all these other competing things during the week that take you away, because we want you to focus on the 3 key things that we think will help you to grow and to continue your walk with God the most effectively. We know that you have piano lessons and soccer practice and football practice and work and all the things that have to be done all week long, and you don't have time to do 12 different things. It'd be great if we all did. You do 12 Bible studies during the week. It'd be a wonderful thing, but we know that's not a reality. And so we as a church want to keep things very simple, right? We want to keep a very simple focus, and because we're small, we feel that it's important that we try to do a couple of things really well, all right? So this fall, we're going to be revamping and relaunching all of our small groups, and we want to challenge you to be a part of that. And we try really hard to do a great weekend service and to challenge you to get involved in small groups, and those are the big things that we want to be focused on as a church. So right now, we're not going to be able to do Bible studies because that takes resources, that takes energy and time, and we need you to focus on being in a small group and serving in a ministry when you're here on Sunday mornings. All right, now another question we're going to have is, what about youth group? Right? What about youth group? See, I was a youth pastor for 10 years, and I love students. I love them with a passion. I still do. And I'm so passionate about young people, and I believe young people, and I've been telling them this for years, they're not the church of the future, they're the church today. And that's why our church has a lot of young people serving in it, and that's something I love, and it's something I hope will always be a mark of our church. And so the last thing that I want to do is have youth group during church so that it pulls all the students out of the worship service and pulls all the students out of opportunities to serve. Many of our young people are serving in tech and in children's ministries and on the worship team and in a variety of things. And if we offer student ministry during church, then we're saying you have to choose to go to youth group for your class or go to church or serve in a ministry, but you can't do all those things. So Daniil and his team have been doing a phenomenal job with our students, and he and I have agreed that for the next few months this fall, we're going to take a little step and change our direction. And we're going to remain meeting on Wednesday nights, but we're going to step back from Sunday mornings for a while just to adjust to the new format with 2 services. So we feel like that's an important step so that our students and young people can still be involved with us because they are the church. They're not the future of the church. So that's a big thing to me. So lots of questions, lots of things that we could unpack. Just a few of those that I wanted to share with you. So bottom line is this. Nehemiah saw a need in his city, and he saw that it was wrecking his city both physically and spiritually. You know what? I look around our city and I see a lot of needs too. And I think God's put us here for a purpose, and I don't know about you, but I want to spend my life and I want to stand before God and I want to say, God, I didn't leave any stone unturned. I didn't stop at anything to reach the people that you put into my life. And my prayer over the next few weeks as we have this series, I want to invite you to come back because I'm going to be challenging you on how you can be a part of it, how you can get involved. And I believe just like God did an amazing work through Nehemiah and through his faith, that as we step up in our faith to the next level and as we trust God to do next level things in our hearts, that God's going to do next level things in our church and in our community. That God has great things in store. So I want to invite you to pray with me about that and to ask God to be at work in our midst and to ask God to do great things. And I hope that like Nehemiah, you'll say, you know what, I'm here. I got this little position as cupbearer to the king. I got this position at work. Maybe God could use me there. I got this position in my neighborhood. Maybe God could use me there. I got this position in the Little League softball team. Maybe God could use me there. And if we start praying and believing and trusting God just like Nehemiah did, I can only imagine what God's going to do next.